Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Skill RPA. So in this video, we are going to look at set transaction status workflow. And as part of that, like in the process transaction, like in the past videos, like we covered of like how we can build the RE framework from the scratch. And now in this video, we'll look at the set transaction status. This is the only workflow which we left without implementing anything. And we have covered each and every workflow, individual work framework or workflows in this video. So under the set transaction status, as we are invoking this inside the process automation, process transaction state, we have three possible outcomes here. One is successful, the business rule exception, and the system exception. So in this video, like we need to have three different conditions here. So for first condition, what we will do is we'll just drag and drop the flow decision here. And in this, there are three possible outcomes I told, right? So let us take three sequences, 1, 2, and 3. So these are the three sequences we have. And let us rename these sequences. Success, success, business rule exception, and system exception. The transaction status workflow, we will be having these three possible outcomes here. So now we need to have a condition here. So for that to go into successful, we need to, like for this, we need to have two arguments. One is in underscore business exception, in underscore system exception. So here argument type for the business rule exception, it will be UiPath dot core dot business exception. And here it will be system dot exception. And in this flow decision, we need to write the condition that both should not have anything. So in business rule exception is nothing, and in system exception is nothing. So we are considering that like we don't have any business exception, and also we don't have any system exception. So if that becomes true, which means it's a successful scenario. So we'll just connect it here. And in case of false, so we are saying that like both are not true, which means like we just need to come down. We need to put one more condition here, decision block. And here we need to consider whether it is a business rule exception or not. So we'll use in underscore system exception is nothing. So if there is no system exception, which means like it's a business rule exception. Now here in this scenarios, like we covered almost everything, and we need to have one more argument here, in underscore transaction number. This is nothing but which transaction it is processing. Okay. And we can say it as IO. both the directions, because we want to take that into the main as well, because we want to understand, like we need to have the clear picture of like whether we are having the correct, like which transaction number we are processing it. So we can just create transaction number integer. So here got the transaction number as well. So first, let us first build what needs to be there inside these sequences. So here we need to have set transaction status. In all the scenarios, we need to have the set transaction status, which means like we will be updating the transaction item, whether the transaction is processed or not. So we need to have the transaction item, which is of queue type. Dot queue. So we'll be passing on that here in underscore transaction item. And it is successful, right? And the queue name, it is not necessary to give the queue name because we already gave the transaction item. That will be great and good enough because that will be holding all the information related to the queue. Now there is nothing else to be updated because it's a successful. And in case if you want to update the output of like what actually happened in the queue, we can just put some data here. And it is not that much required as of now. So we are putting the status to successful. So this is done. And here the business will exception also using the same set transaction status, and we'll be passing on the transaction item here, and the status will be changing it to the failed. And here we'll be coming down and we have type of error type, which is a business. And the reason we need to give for that in underscore business will exception dot message. So this will give the exact error message whatever got encountered. So this is how we will be updating the status of business will exception. And then the system exception, yes, we will be using the same. In underscore transaction item, and it is failure. Here we will be using error type to application, and we'll be giving the reason in underscore system exception dot message. Okay, and this is the basic way of building this set transaction status. But there are like we need to build some more logics as well, because we need to understand like whether the retry is available in the system exception or not, because in case of system exception, right, we may need to retry the transaction. So we'll see how we are going to build it out. But before that, what we will be doing is we'll be just incrementing the transaction item number. IO transaction number equal to IO transaction number plus 1, because in terms of success, we doesn't want to execute the same transaction again. In terms of business rule exception also, we doesn't want to retry that. So in these two scenarios, we will be incrementing the transaction number. And in case of system exception, we'll see how we will be doing it. But before going there, so let us do some exception handling of kind of thing here, because what will happen is like this is the basic thing which we will be doing it in the set transaction status. But there are some things, couple of things which we may need to handle it here, right? So let me do one thing. Before that, let me remove this and let me put a sequence, because we need to add few more numbers, few more details as well. So we'll go down and we are going to connect this to. And we will put that incremental of the transaction number here. Okay. So whatever we developed till now, we developed just like without checking the things out, right? And we need to add this exception as well. We need to have it in the try catch block, and we need to handle the exception, right? And we will be putting a log message here because we'll be using log message. Success. And what we will do is we will read through the same exception. Like for throwing in exceptions, we'll be using throw activity, but in order to read through the catched exception, because though I got this, I doesn't want the number to be incremented or like something needs to be done. In this case, we will be using this read through so that that will be catched in this catch block, right? And let us come here. See, this is up to us, like whether to keep this read through or not. It is not mandatory. But here we need to do this in transaction item. So this is how we generally build our um, set transaction status workflow. But before that, we need to check um, but before setting this, like because we are using this set transaction status, right? And the RE framework, we can implement it for other than the orchestrator queue items as well. So we'll put an if condition in transaction item is not nothing. If it is not nothing, and also in underscore transaction item dot get type, okay, which means like we are trying to get the transaction item type. Whatever the transaction item we are processing, we are asking what is the type of that transaction is get type of UiPath dot core dot q item. So what we are asking is like in case if there is, if we need to have a transaction item and also the type should be q item. So in this case only we want to update the transaction status. If not, we doesn't want to do this. So this is how, this is for the success. We completed it for the success. So after this, what we will be doing is the recent step. So generally, what we will do is like we'll be just adding the logs to the transaction item. Whatever the transaction item we have, we will be just adding the logs. Add log fields. This will be added to the queues, and we can just have the queue as status success. So we can have this like based on our requirement. By default, it is will be having transaction status, transaction number, transaction ID. We will be adding it. So in the similar way, we can just add these things. But this is not mandatory. All the time we need to. It's not necessary that like we need to have this, but like RE framework will be coming up with these things, and we'll see like when we are actually looking at the existing RE framework. So we are just trying to build the bare minimum what we have. So in here also in the business rule exception also, it will be of the similar case. Like we will be checking what is the type and all. And the only difference between these two is the only difference between these two is like updating of the status. So what I can do is I can just copy this directly, and there is no difference, zero difference in this. The only difference is in this place we will be having this error. Status will be failed instead of successful. That is the only difference between the business rule exception and the system exception. Even the flow is also similar. If you see, right, in both the cases, uh, business rule exception and system exception, it is going to the successful. So that is the only difference we have. But in the system exception, we'll be doing a bit more things compared to the business rule exception. So what we will be doing? What we will be doing is like we will be trying to fetch whether the retry is queue retry is there or not. Right. Assign, and we are going to create a variable queue retry, and it is of type boolean. So whether to know the queue retry or not, we need to get the read whether we are having the orchestrator queue or not. So the syntax will be same, like in transaction item is not nothing, and also in underscore transaction item dot get type is get type UiPath dot co dot queue item. So this will return as the boolean, and it will decide whether we have the queue retry or not. So this is how we will be creating that. And also in the if condition, instead of writing all that syntaxes, we'll be using this queue retry. And also why we are taking it, like in other cases we are directly writing that conditions, but here in this we are just writing queue retry if condition, queue retry, and why we are doing that. That will help us in different activities as well in this, and we'll see that what actually we are trying to do here. So we will be having try catch here, system exception. So we'll be using same, like we'll be doing it in the same. We'll be logging and we'll be using the rethrow. So let me just updating status to system exception, and we can use the rethrow after this. So in the set transaction status, after this we see we are talking about like retrying of the transaction, right? So what we need to have is we need to have a retry number. So we need to create a retry number here, which is IO underscore retry number. And in IO underscore retry number, we'll be using IO, and you can have integer. Okay. Here, once we update the status, we should get the retry number, right? And if we are using orchestrator queues, we should get the retry number from the orchestrator queue. So we'll be using IO retry number equal to in underscore transaction item dot retry number. So we will be just calling that method retry number, so that like it will give us the retry number in this. So now we are updating of this status of is done. And also we incremented the retry number, right? So this part is done. And now what we need to do is we need to check whether we are the retry available or not, retry the current transaction or not. Okay. Before that, what we need to do is we need to create one workflow here. Take screenshot. So we created one more workflow, which is nothing but take screenshot.xaml. And we will be invoking this activity, take screenshot here before updating the status, because in case of system exception, right, we want to make sure that in which state the screen was present, so that like it will be easier for us when we are debugging the things. See, these all are added advantage for in order for us to debug the things and understand the exception. So it should not be a blocker for the next transactions. That's the reason for which we are keeping all this in the try catch, and we are handling the exceptions if any exception comes inside this take screenshot. And taking screenshot, so the important is like we just need to have in underscore screenshot path, whatever the screenshot we are taking, right, that path is required. Like we will be having some more added things as well, but for minimum functionality it is not required. And we have the screenshot image, or we can directly have this screen file as well. And for file we just need to directly pass this screenshot file path, and we just need to combine that with the directory name and the screenshot name, whatever we want to have, because we need to have a separate number name for each and every screenshot, right? We can say this is the directory path. So what we can do is we just need to check if directory dot exists in underscore screenshot path. If this path exists, then that is fine. If not, we will be creating directory. We want to make sure that we have the directory place already available before we are taking the screenshot. So in order to have this path dot combine, when you want to append the file name or a folder names, right? So in that case, we'll be using this in underscore screenshot path, comma, and here we need to give the file name exception screenshot, and we can have now dot toString, because to have it uniqueness we just need to have some date format included in that, and we will be writing this. This will give me the uniqueness of it, and we will be using .png. So now it will be stored here. So this is what actually we need to do in terms of taking the screenshot. Now we will be passing on the screenshot path, which we will be taking it from the config or assets. Like it's up to us, like where we want to have this, all the screenshots. And this retry is also done, and taking screenshot is also done. And we need to look at the retry, whether to retry the current transaction or not. And before that, let me do one thing before going to the init, because if we are going to init, right, we will be initializing the applications. But before that, we need to use the close all applications, and we'll be putting this in the try catch, some exception. And in the catch block, we will be using kill all process. in case if it is not safely closed. And we'll be putting this in the try catch. So this is how. So the only part which is left over is retry the current transaction. So we will be creating one more workflow. So now you will get to know why I kept this at the end of the at the end. So there is a lot of challenges we will be having here. For this, what we need to have is we didn't got the config also. We need to get the config to there. We got the config, and here also we need the config, and I'll just tell you what I'll require. Config, system exception, retry number, transaction number. We'll just use the control C, and I'll come here. I'll just put control V. So everything is got created. So along with this three, I need to have one more thing, which is in underscore retry, which is a Boolean type. So now we got all the arguments which are required for this. And let us do one thing. Let us not have a sequence. Let us have a flow chart here because we have multiple conditions. So I'll do is I'll just take this name and I'll put it for this. And here, what we need to do is first we need to check whether the retry we reach across the max retry or not. So we'll go to the flow decision. Here we will be putting a condition on top of the max retry number is greater than 0 or not. Convert dot to integer in score config so we need to add this into the config prior to this string than 0. Let me open this. So if that is true, which means like we have the retry. If not, we will be using like in the false condition, we won't be using anything. Like we can just use log message. So we're trying to build this thing like this current retry. We should work using the queues and without using the queues as well. So we can write the error message, no retries. And just simply write in underscore system exception dot message. You can write a lot of things like at which activity it what actually happened and all these things, but it is not that much required. So So we won't be writing that much. And here we will be checking whether we crossed out the max retries or not. So here IO transaction number is greater than, we can just write something, copy from here, whatever we kept, like whether we have the retry number available or not, which is nothing but we'll be using this greater than or equal to. Okay. So if the max retries are not reached, we will be going for the retry. If not, we will be saying that like max retry is reached. So for that, what we will do is we will just have this. Once max retry is reached, we just need to update the retry number to 0 because it should not impact the next transaction, right? And we will increment the transaction number with 1. IO transaction number plus 1. So if we see here, right, in the successful and the business rule exception, we are adding the transaction number. At the same time, what we need to do is we need to empty the transaction number. IO retry number, sorry. We need to make it 0. Okay. So here, once we reach the maximum retries, we covered it off. Now we need to go for one more condition, Q retry. So here we will be writing Q retry. Okay. In terms of Q retry, we will be, if we are using the Q retry, we will be incrementing the transaction number IO transaction number equal to IO transaction number plus 1. So what we will do is we will increment the retry number. IO retry number equal to IO retry number plus 1. Because you are directly dealing with the orchestrator queue, it will tell us like whether we have retry available or not. So based on that, we will be moving it out. Like here, we will be writing, right, in the set transaction status. Here we are trying to fetch our retry number from the transaction item. So if we are using orchestrator queue retry, then it is not necessary for us to increment the retry number. Okay. And here we just need to pass in all those parameters now. Just retry. Here we will be invoking this current retry current transaction. And have in config and also in system exception and also IO retry number, IO transaction number, and also Q retry. And we'll be putting this in a try catch. Ideally, we won't get any error, but for safer side, we will be putting all this in the try catches. And all these things are done. And now we covered with the set transaction status as well. And with this, we completed the set transaction status. And we just need to invoke all this. And only one thing which we forgot, I guess, is like we need to create a variable of retry number here. And for the transaction number, by default, we will be giving 1. And here we will be writing retry number. This is 0, the default value. So as soon as like it comes here, like whenever we are starting the process, we'll be having these as a default values. And we'll be just passing on all these values here. Business exception, system exception, transaction number, transaction item, retry number, config. So this is our RE framework. And with this, we completed the complete development of RE framework from the scratch, including the set transaction status as well. Like forgot about like invoking all the like importing all the variables in these things, because it doesn't make much difference. We just need to pass on the values. So this is how we will be building this RE framework template from the scratch. And in the next videos, we will be having a minor discussion on like how we can convert this like existing RE framework to work with other different types of data, like other than the orchestrator queues. What changes we may need to make for using the RE framework without an orchestrator queues. And thanks for watching, and please subscribe to Skill RPA YouTube channel.